You know the time when your reliable old phone eventually dies on you? Creaking, old-fashioned, but somehow still trying to keep going? But instead of getting the latest model, you just stick with it? That's what Nazi Germany did with their most famous warplane. By 1943, the fabled Ju-87 Stuka was a killing machine, slower than a family sedan, armor thinner than cardboard. But when German designers designed the perfect replacement, the Ju-187, with retracting gear, thick armor, and a rotating tail, High Command rejected it. They chose to keep using the old Stuka instead. This decision is crazy, but it speaks volumes about how fear of change can destroy even the strongest war machines. The Stuka once terrorized Europe with its scream. It was called the Trumpet of Death by soldiers. But in 1942, it was the flying coffin their pilots were too scared to enter. So why reject a superior option? Why clasp certain death over possibly innovative ambiguity? The response will transform your concept of innovation, fear, and failure. Hit that like button and let's find out this incredible story, because at times, the best lessons are learned from the planes that never flew. The birth of a legend. To solve this mystery, let's go back to the start. It was 1936. Spain was tearing itself apart in civil war, and Nazi Germany saw an opportunity, not just to test new arms, but to fashion them in the flames of real combat. Enter the Ju-87 Stuka. Spanish Republican soldiers, the first to hear that earth-shattering howl resonating through the battlefield, had no idea that they were witnesses to the birth of a legend. It was created by small sirens mounted on the fixed landing gear of the aircraft, a weapon of the mind as deadly as its bombs. Spanish newspapers dubbed it El Canto del Miedo, the Song of Fear. But terror was only half of it. The Stuka was a revolution in precision bombing. While the rest of the world was bombing city blocks blanket style, the Stuka could thread a needle from 12,000 feet. German pilots practiced mercilessly to put their bombs within 100 meters of pinpoint targets. Bridges, caches of supplies, command posts, nothing was safe from the Stuka's precision bombing. Its secret to success was its groundbreaking design. Those distinctive inverted gull wings weren't just for aesthetics. They gave the plane the structural strength to execute its namesake near vertical dives. Enormous dive brakes deployed like air anchors, steadying the plane as it dove towards ground in terror-inducing pitches. Twin bombs, half recessed in streamlined pods, could be released with unimaginable accuracy. By 1939, Luftwaffe Stuka operations were an art form. Over Poland, France, and the Netherlands, the appearance of these screaming death machines broke enemy morale before the first bomb fell. Tank columns scattered, infantry fled positions, and entire defensive lines dissolved at the approach of incoming Stukas. This was blitzkrieg at its finest, a quick advance, but also psychological destruction. The Stuka was not merely an aerial weapon, but an instrument of fear that enhanced its tangible destruction tenfold by sheer fright. Fault lines in the armor. Yet as the Stuka etched its legend across the continent, insiders were quietly murmuring unpleasant realities. The planes that had dominated the initial war were flawed for the war's development. The first signs of trouble appeared during the Battle of Britain in 1940, when Stukas were met with the new British planes, such as the Hurricane and Spitfire. It was a disaster. Those fixed landing gears that contained those terrible sirens within, they added tremendous drag, bringing the planes to a pathetic 320 kilometers per hour. A modern family sedan could practically catch up to that. The defensive arm of the Stuka was as miserable, though. One machine gun in the rear for the radio operator to handle. It was like entering a fight with a knife versus a pistol. The lack of armor on the plane left it exposed even to medium ground fire. The Luftwaffe learned to fly Stukas only with huge fighter escort, but as the war spread to North Africa, the Eastern Front, and beyond, those escorts grew shorter and shorter in supply. Stuka units started to take awful casualties. Pilots who were once the cream of the Luftwaffe were now flying suicide missions in outmoded planes. By 1942, the writing was on the wall. Combat reports were flooding in of Stukas being cut down by enemy fighters, shot down by ground fire, and unable to penetrate increasingly sophisticated air defenses. The psychological weapon that had broken armies in the past was now breaking itself on the realities of modern warfare. Something had to give. The question was, what? Enter the Ju-187, Germany's bizarre solution. In depth in 1942, as the war was raging furiously on 3 continents, German designers had come up with their answer, the Ju-187. On paper, it seemed to be everything the Stuka should have been from the beginning. Gone were the fixed landing gear that made so much drag. The Ju-187 had sleek, retractable gear that would significantly enhance speed and agility. The single defensive gun was replaced with an actual rear turret, providing the aircraft with some real teeth in battle. More powerful motors promised superior performance at altitude, with added armor providing protection for the crew against ground fire. But the most revolutionary aspect of the Ju-187 was its rotating tail. Not only was this new, it was revolutionary. The whole empennage could swing, theoretically, to enable the aircraft to stay stable in extreme flight maneuvers while giving the rear gunner unheard-of fields of fire. Imagine it, a twist-and-turn dive bomber like a fighter plane, precision strikeability like the Stuka, and self-defense like a heavy bomber. It was as if it were the final solution to the Luftwaffe's increasing dilemma. German designers estimated that the Ju-187 would cruise at over 450 kilometers per hour in level flight, almost 50% quicker than the Stuka. Its payload capacity would be enhanced, its range would be better, and its survivability would be enhanced. On paper, it was everything the Luftwaffe required. So what went wrong? The devil in the details. As prototype flying started, the Ju-187's radical design revealed itself to be more radical than practical. That wonderful turnable tail section that had sounded so wonderful in theory turned out to be something of an engineering nightmare in practice. The rotational system for the whole empennage was wonderfully complex, a gearbox, hydraulic, and joint puzzle that contributed immense weight and mechanical complexity. Worse, initial flight testing revealed the rotation system incorporated fatal structural imperfections in the very areas where the airplane would need to be the strongest. The weight penalties were overwhelming. All those fancy systems, the retractable gear, the tail that rotated, the rear turret, blew the plane way past its estimated specs. Rather than the 450 kilometers per hour it was supposed to deliver, estimates now predicted the Ju-187 would just barely outperform the Stuka. More damning still, the advanced systems required regular maintenance, at a time when German forces already had extended to the limit supply chains to deal with. The last thing they needed was an aeroplane that required special components and highly skilled technicians. Test pilots reported that the spinning tail, rather than bestowing more maneuverability upon the plane, had the effect of destabilizing it and making it harder to control. The same component that was designed to be the Ju-187's greatest asset had proved to be its downfall. The economics of war. By the autumn of 1943, hard facts were at hand. The Reichsluftfahrtministerium, Germany's air ministry, had an impossible choice. They could invest tremendous resources in further development of the Ju-187, hoping to cure its inherent weaknesses, or they could scrap it and opt for the proven but obsolete Ju-87. The choice boiled down to hard numbers. Refitting factories for Ju-187 manufacture would take months of idle time when planes were desperately required on the front lines. Reducing pilots to produce the Ju-187 would take expensive fuel and instructional time. Worst of all, the systems on the Ju-187 would stress supply lines already groaning under their weight. Meanwhile, the plane Ju-87, as much as it had its flaws, had qualities that could not be measured on paper. Pilots knew how to fly it, mechanics knew how to repair it, factories knew how to produce it. Spare parts were stored throughout occupied Europe. The Reichsluftfahrtministerium made up its mind. The Ju-187 project was dropped quietly. The money that might have been invested in the creation of Germany's next-generation dive bomber went towards the improvement of the current Ju-87 variants, and, increasingly, to fighter manufacture. The Stuka's last stand. And so, the Ju-87 Stuka, that relic of Blitzkrieg's glory days, lasted on. It was not, however, unscathed. German engineers came up with newer models, the heavily armored G-series for anti-tank missions, night attack special models, and even models equipped to attack ships. Now, once terror-inducing aircraft of Europe's skies turned into something entirely new. On the Eastern Front, Stukas turned into flying artillery to deliver close air support to hard-pressed ground force. In the Mediterranean, they stalked Allied convoys. Towards the end of the war, they were doing everything, supply drops to training pilots. It was not glamorous work, but it was necessary work. The Stuka's greatest strength had always been its reliability, and in a war where every asset was valuable, reliability trumped innovation every time. But here's the unsettling question that keeps sleepless nights for historians. What if Germany persisted with the development of the Ju-187, even with its defects? What if they'd solved the rotating tail issue, refined the design, and manufactured this sophisticated aircraft in numbers? Would a more rapid, better armed dive bomber have turned the war around? Might precision bombing from surviving aircraft have upset the D-Day landings, or shattered the Soviet push? Or would the Ju-187 have merely been another costly sideshow in a war Germany was already losing? This decision to abandon innovation in favor of familiarity speaks volumes about the deadly inflexibility of the German war machine. While Allied nations innovated, evolved, and modernized their planes continuously, Germany was stuck in its early triumphs. The Stuka had performed so effectively in 1939 that German decision-makers could not conceive anything better. They opted for the devil they knew rather than the angel they did not, and by doing so, might have signed their death warrant. Was it practical resource management or the demise of German ingenuity? The answer may surprise. Conclusion. Here's the harsh reality. Germany lost the Ju-187 due to poor engineering. They lost it due to fear. Fear of transformation. Fear of acknowledging their miracle weapon is obsolete. Fear of experimenting when everything was collapsing. The Stuka was no longer an airplane. It was a metaphor. And metaphors are difficult to let go of, even when they're killing your airmen. So, Germany opted for the known over the new. They continued flying death traps rather than creating something improved. The Ju-187 died on the drawing board, and with it, Germany's last best chance of air superiority. Moral? Sometimes the biggest danger is no danger at all. So, what do you think? Would you have constructed the bizarre rotating tail bomber or continued with what was succeeding? Leave your comments in the box below. If this article opened your eyes, hit the like button and subscribe for more incredible tales from aviation history. Until then, remember, the most interesting airplanes are sometimes the ones that never took to the skies.